Does everybody have the picture that wants to use it? Okay. So this one is nicely busted. There was a chasm between the daughter and mother, as illustrated in the picture. There is a finished one of these floating around out there. So I'd ask that you don't try to pass this off as your own. But I'll show you where the person who did this succeeded and where they maybe failed. This is a challenging area right here, right? That dress was gone. That arm is looking a little flat there. Here's the real, this poor child here. The person who did this one copied the left eye over, and so she's kind of a something eerily wrong about her, kind of Quasimodo issue going on. This is not an easy one. I present it as a well-damaged one that affords us a lot of possibilities, shall we say. Okay, so I'll try to tackle a couple examples here, and we'll look at really two main newish tools for you guys, which will be the clone stamp, which you probably are familiar with, and something called the patch healing or patch tool, which is like a magic version of the clone tool that your eyes will light up and go, why didn't I hear about this sooner? Okay. One thing I noticed about this one is when the person scanned it, they didn't exactly get the halves together, right? It's not that when this was found, somebody had cut a 1/4 inch out of it, but I've got like a 1/4 inch gap here. I need to actually seam together. So the lines here should line up with the lines there. And on top of that, you know, it's a piece of paper that's torn. All of that tear stuff, there should be a place where that puzzle fits together perfectly, and both of those images are out of there. So the first thing I'm going to need to do is to select something with great accuracy. And it's still going to have some issues with it, but I can get close. So if you don't care too much, you might just go with the regular lasso and come in and just try to get it. As I said before, my lasso chops are pretty lousy when it comes to the hand lasso. So this is calling to me and saying I'm going to do this with the pen tool so I can kind of go back and correct my mistakes as I go through. So P for pen brings up the pen tool, and I can go to the paths palette. I don't have to click on a new icon to create a new path. It'll automatically do that when I start drawing, but old habits, you know, die hard. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to get as close as I can to the surface of it, not the paper anymore. And this is just to kind of fix that chasm, get the halves back together again. And you can see too that if I tried to just start painting these back together, look at the sleeve there, that wouldn't line up. And there's going to be some issues through here. The fact that this is a color scan is actually working in my favor right now, because I can see the difference between the sort of emulsion kind of surface color of that photo and what the paper color is. So if you have scanned in grayscale, it's something you miss out of it. It's not quite as effective. Which brings up an interesting question of whether or not you're going to really work in monochrome, in a completely desaturated world, or if you're going to leave it to the last minute. Because when you're sampling color from the original, we might be thinking of it as tone, but we might actually be picking up color cast, like, well, this part of the scan's a little pinkish, and as I brought it over to this slightly yellowish area, I'm not painting in the same color. So once I've done that more complicated edge, let's go way out to the outside, make sure I got it. And I'm not worried about fixing the border. I'm going to just replace the border and make it look like it was, you know, pure white when it's all said and done. So you can crop into and get rid of the torn edges on stuff. For me, that's going to mean I need to fix this, but I don't need to fix this up here. Okay, and once I have my selection, how do I load that path as a selection? What's the keystroke or combination of?
Control right click.
I wonder. That might too. I'm going to go to my move tool and right click on it. It's not letting me do that. But it's over here. The one I know for sure is to command click on the thumbnail while it's over here, and that'll load it as a selection. I think right clicking it over there will do that too. Let's take a quick look. Deselect. Right click on this guy.
Oh no, I just meant like, cause like you'll like press control and you'll like hover over it and then it'll like do the thing.
Control. Let me try it.
And maybe it's like the other thing for you since you're on the Mac.
All right, well, I've got it selected with my command click there. I could either dupe this up onto a new layer, or I could make for a destructive move, which is to just start moving it. So I know that it needs to go over to the left, and I need to, it's only down a pixel or two. Just so happens that our move tool, once it's selected, and that's V for move if you want to use the shortcut, or reach on up and grab that double arrow thing. You can use the arrows on your keypad to move it. So as I'm going to zoom in and take a close look at one of these trouble areas here and see what I really got. Okay, so using the arrows, I'm just moving it, and I've moved over my crack, so no longer am I seeing that paper tear anymore, and I'm putting them together. It's pretty good. That shoulder is pretty hard to tell. I'm going to look somewhere else and see if I can find. Okay, so I assume that her sleeve there should be continuous. This could be a case of that original is so wrecked that it's actually coming up in 3D a little bit, and I would need to distort it. But I'm going to just say this is more important than that guy's shoulder, and just line those up. And I'll tell you, this looks good here. Kid looks great. Her finger is on her hand. That's a good thing. Shoes are a little off. That's okay. Yeah, I'm going to call that good. Upon hitting deselect, that move is done. So Command D, I've moved that piece over. Not every original is going to need that. This is a great one because it does need it. And a bad one because what should be a 2D image is really three-dimensional. You can see it's got a highlight on it from the scan, all sorts of things to deal with here. This is like the worst spot. I don't want to start there. That sounds scary. Let's start with some simple stuff here. Okay, so the best case is I've got this beautiful patch of wall. Wall is continuous. It's very hard for me to make a mistake here. That's an easy thing. Something like these fine cracks through here, that gets to be a little bit more complicated. When there's geography back behind the crack that needs rebuilding, that's pretty hard too. Let's talk about the stamp tool as a starting point, and then we'll surprise you with something else. Here's a good stamping point. So I've got a nice patch of wall here and trim that I know that I could bring up into this bad area here. So S is the stamp tool. It looks like a rubber stamp icon, and it's a two-step process, one to sample an area and one to apply the area. So we sample with an Alt or Option, and our brush type makes a difference here. If you sample with a hard brush, you'll get a hard sample. So it's as if you're picking up a circular, let's say, piece of the image, a donut, and putting that donut somewhere else. Copying a donut's worth of image, and I'm talking, of course, of donut holes, not donuts with holes in them. Delicious. I haven't eaten yet. Holes, donut holes that will copy up. So imagine an example here where I'm going to sample with the Option key held down. You'll notice the icon changes, and I click once to sample. And when I do, it's giving me a little preview of what I picked up. I picked up a piece of the trim there. And if I come up here and start lining it up with where I want to paint, I can click and drag through and start to repair. I'm just copying a section, and because life is made up of repetitive things, I'm able to do that for lots of stuff. Now, the guy who tried to repair that eyeball took a right eye and made it a left eye. And so you have this kind of, something's uncannily wrong about it because we're asymmetrical people. And also there's a perspective change because her head is like this, that eye should have been smaller, and other things. But something like this evenly illuminated wall means that I can, Option click and start painting up in here. I can misalign it. Let's do an accidental bad job here and end up with something like that. So that preview is there to help you to make sure that you're dropping it in just the right spot. So again, when you sample, notice I sampled an error too. This guy got copied up here. So look for areas that are free from their own damage too, or else you have to paint those out. So what I might have done instead is to start down here, get rid of this fuzz, then start sampling, knowing that I can copy up this and have that be continuous. Now I'm really attuned to like copy stampy kinds of things, so I see the repetitive little. That's fine. The user is not going to notice that, but if you see like a spare eyeball or something, you know, that's where we're going to have to draw the line. But curing this area here is going to go pretty quick because I can just copy it up. And when it comes to something like here where I don't necessarily have, I can't sample from here. Why not? So bring that over here, what's going to happen? I'm going to have the shadow version, right? So that's not as good. So this is an area I have to kind of build. I could try this and see if it works. You know, see if it doesn't look too dark in comparison. It's okay. You probably need to just come in here with this stuff. And short bursts is good. You start to not see the brushwork, maybe. No.
What button are you pressing again?
So this is an option to sample and click. So left click. So I begin by sampling with an option click. Basically, I'm identifying the area I want to copy. Let's make it a terribly obvious one.
Oh, well, like, what button would it be on?
Yeah, I think yours is labeled option on Windows, right? Alt or option, right? Okay. So I'll give you a bad example, right? Sample. All right. So for better or worse, this is a very powerful tool where things like that are possible all too easily. Okay, so that is a way to deal with this open space. You might find it better for real sort of surgery work like this stuff here. Let's say I want to keep the character of the hair, so all of those highlights maintained across the crack. I would option alt sample here. Notice it's got a bit of a curve there. I can't go too far with that sample, or it's gonna have sort of flyaway hair. Straight here. Something like this, I'm sampling forehead. This, I'm sampling sort of that scalp. A lot of short clicks to get in there. I might go from the left here for this piece. I'm using a soft brush. Let me show you what a hard brush would do. That guy. Nice and hard. Let's try same area. Okay, I'll try and do that crack there. So with the hard one, it can be harder to hide your tracks. I guess that's working pretty nice there. Let's see about those. Yeah, it's still a pretty good example. If it's something where, I got one. The grass. Grass is a classic one where you would think a soft brush would be a good choice because we don't want to actually see the manipulation. But a big soft brush, watch what happens when I copy this grass over. So we get pretty big, we get pretty soft, and alter option, click over here. See how it's kind of ghosting on? I can see a little through that grass. It's sort of doubling up the image, so that's not quite right. I wouldn't necessarily want to do a hard one there either. Let's do that. Option and click, because you might see the circle. So what I do for that is to find a really organic, twisty brush that's got rough edges, and then you stamp, and nobody can see where it ended because it's chaotic. If that's a little soft, maybe that's good. So there's sort of, not only are you stamping, you're also thinking about softness, hardness, brush size, and so on. Does anybody use this tool a lot for stuff? Or have used it in the past? Okay, so not a lot of you. I was certainly, for me, a revelation as kind of like one of the first magic tricks in Photoshop. Like, holy moly, you can do that. I wonder, see that line in his cheek? We want to maintain that little bit of shadow there. I'm wondering if I can click here and drag some of that up. It's working pretty good. Feel a little brushy through there. It's a little tricky. So that's a tough spot. The faces are going to be the hardest part because we know what they look like, and if you mess it up, people can spot that. So I think if I gone with a softer brush there, maybe bigger and softer. Let's see. Yeah, soft as I can. See if I can fix that cheek. Oh, got a kind of a crazy highlight there. That highlight shouldn't be everywhere, just in one spot. So some tricks easier than others. That's not too bad. He's got it sort of see that doubling of that little spot there. Not ideal. So some of these require more work than others. Let's do a big patch of stuff using a different tool. This would be certainly doable with the stamp tool. I'd be doing about 4 or 5 lines and it would take a few strokes to get there. This is the patch tool, and it's like stamping for free, kind of. So it is, bring it up with J, but it's this little guy here that looks like a sewn patch. I guess that's the joke. And with it, it's a 2-step process. We marquee over the area we want to change. So let's say this is my trouble spot. And then we click within that area, and we're actually pulling a sheet of better from neighboring areas underneath it. So in this case, I want to pull this clean stuff over to this cracked area. And it shows you a preview. So I can go that way, go that way. Let's try this piece right here. The magic is when you release it, it's sort of smart in that it changes and fixes the exposure as you let go of it, and it's kind of perfect. If it's a lot of detail, you might see that softening going on because it's really a core of 100% and then a really smart but soft edge that kind of does a pretty good job, and then it does what it can to kind of get the exposure right. So an example might be, can we? Let's see if I can cure this guy. I'll tell you what, let's get the whole thing. So we've got kind of a hot spot and a shadowed area right next to each other. I think that's because the crack is coming up in the scan. So I'm going to try and pull it over from the right, and it will keep some of that too hot behind it. Let's see what happens. So I'm going to pull from over here. So see how it made a slightly bigger, brighter area in the process? Let's undo it. See what happens if I grab it from over here. See how it kind of kept a little bit of that shadow in there? So I think it's easier, and it still requires some tastefulness. Notice I got a little bit of his hair there that moved. When we get into her hair, sorry, I didn't see you there, ma'am. When we get in this close, we might be able to just come in with a brush tool and scale that brush. Use all the stuff that we used in our hand painting and just come on in. And no one need know that we were here. You know, like this hair, I could stamp it. I could be stamping for a long time, or I could just come in and it's mostly black. Let's just go with it. Just bring in some black. And I might get courageous and make that brush bigger. I might work in opacity to fix the area, but I probably got to kick that back a little bit. Sample a neighboring color once in a while to break that up. Painting with opacity, and again, that's a lot better than trying to get that hair back in there. So you have to kind of balance the value of, do I need those lines in there, or does it read as hair? I think on the projector it looks good. On my image it doesn't look very good. So if you look at the recording, you probably see the issues. All right, let's take this. I was afraid to come here, but dealing with this sleeve problem here. I think you could paint by hand the missing stuff. You could stamp it, and I think it's a combination of those. I'll try first to stamp it, see if I can get that line to carry through. But it should change direction, right? And when we're copying a piece of it, it's not going to change direction for us. So if I sample and I start painting, that sleeve's going to want to continue in a straight line. So not accurate to the original, but does anybody need to know that? Maybe I continue down that path. Maybe that's fine. If I want to get it more accurate, I might be into sort of compositing territory, where first let's repair this area. I don't want to copy over garbage, so I'll get rid of that schmutz right there. Get a good piece of arm going, and I can't go far because I got no curve there, but that's a little bit better. And now I can lasso over a section that I like. I'm going to Command J which is going to pop this up onto a new layer. I could also Command-C, Command-V, which will pop it up onto a new layer. Copy, paste. But now I've got a piece of sleeve, which I can use to come on over here and do some pushing. Photoshop has really good distortion capabilities as well as the kind of scale things that we've looked at so far. When I go to my transforms and Command-T, shortcut on those, I've got scale, rotate, the ones that we expect there. But if we right-click in there, we've got some other stuff. We've got skew and distort and a full-on warp. So let's see if I can just skew it and see if I have that work. So I'll just grab an end and, okay, it's off to an angle. That's not too bad. Let's escape that. Command-T, let's try distort. And in this case, I can pick them up individually and move them. So maybe I add a little perspective like that. Picking up the individual points on that square and changing it, that's not bad. You can hit escape if you don't like it. Command-T, I'll show you the warp. Warp is really powerful. And warp might be what we use to fix that eyeball. Here, if I want it curved, I can get real specific and say what's happening to those on a case-by-case basis. I think I have a little too much of it, so I might do a little scale in here. And I might have bumped these guys in the process, so I can kind of line them back up. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, it's not too bad. Now I would just come in and just fix my error area here. And now that I've got a curve, maybe that's just using the stamp tool to carry some pieces over, fix up those naughty bits. Okay, so that's not too bad. You see my brushness, my softness of my brush there? There's kind of a fogginess to the line work there, so I think that's our arm. All right, should we try this eyeball just as a science experiment? I tried it before you guys came, and I didn't like what happened, but let's try this duplicating it up method, because if this is as bad as it gets, then... So we know we need an eye. It's in shadow, so that might save us. I'm going to go ahead and take a pirate-sized piece over here, and Command-J. Command-J to bring it up. All right, so... Wrong. No, that's wrong on so many levels. So perspective change, maybe that means it's narrower. Let's try that. It's farther back, so maybe it's a little scale thing too. Okay, yeah, right. Warping is probably going to be part of it. I'm going to try to erase into this and see if I can get back to original without going crazy. So let's see what my eraser is like here. So I'll get my nose back there, maybe the eyebrows there, that's okay. That's what happens if I tap in here a little bit. Okay, better. Let's try and color correct it back into the shadows. Maybe I'll just do just a quick levels or something on that. So I could go to image, adjust, curves or levels. I like levels for this because it's pretty simple. This one should make it darker. She's not uncute. It's not too bad. She's not like a Nightmare Quasimodo kid, so considering that a win. Okay, so maybe, right? And then it's nightmares tonight, right? Of children walking towards you with offset eyeballs. So it's a way, but look, if we look at it as we zoom out, it's very obviously symmetrical, and we're not. So I don't know. Should we warp it? Let's get it into about the right space and add a little Command-T, and we're into real tiny stuff here. Warp, and I feel like we would... It's sort of a proportional scale, right? We want this side to be scaling back faster than this side, so I wonder. I don't know. And sometimes you got to zoom out and see how bad you're doing. And now she's got a cage on her eye. It's really hard to see. I think there's a way to hide that. Let me see if it's Command and semicolon. No, that won't let you. Okay. All right, maybe. I think some shadowing and then fixing the rest of this nightmare that's going on over here would probably do it. So I would be, I don't think there's anything to stamp there. There's just not enough information. So I might be coming in with somewhat more broad color and hoping to blend this back much as we blended our fruit last time. All right. kind of pushing that color around. Eventually I'd find the edge of her and blend that back. And she's a tough one. She's a tough one. Let's see, are there any other kind of obvious problems here? Most of these are solvable the way we just did. Let's try with the patch tool. Let's see how broad an area we can do. And you notice that with the patch tool, I'm selecting not too much outside the area I want to repair. Patch tool is like, so I'm up on the wrong layer there. So it's saying, hey, get back on your master layer. So this actually does something. To which I say, okay. And let's see if I can just go on. So I got a little bit of a fog from this patch that was included. But it's weird. It's a combination of it smears some stuff and keeps some stuff perfectly sharp. If your photo had a lot of grain, you'd probably want to use this instead of hand painting areas because your hand painting is going to be grain free. When they do this in movies, they sometimes take out the grain, do the repair, and then add the grain back again. So maybe that's a path to consider.
There are brushes too with the grain in them because I found a few
Yeah.
that I use.
Cool. Yeah, and so then it'd be a case of matching grain because there'll be noise, there'll be digital noise, and then there'll be this very specific, what was the camera, how was it printed, how did I scan it? There's so many little like places for noise to get in the process there. But this is like putting together a puzzle. Some people like puzzles. I'm not a huge fan of puzzles, but those are the big couple of tools. So clone, alter option to sample and move pieces. Brush type makes a difference there. Any brush can be used. So if you have a crazy jaggy edge chalk brush for something that you want to clone with jagginess, that's a great way to go. The hand painting process, much as we've done. The patch tool, select it, slide an area in, and then compositing complex areas like the sleeve where we're going to dupe it up, warp it, replace it. Is that the kid that I fixed? No, that's the kid I fixed. I'm like, she's looking pretty good from out here. No, she's her sister. They're of a type, for sure. So, okay. And then when it's all is said and done, I would just crop out the garbage, right? So just get on in here and just take that area and everything outside of that you can paint down to white. If you choose to desaturate it when it's all said and done, you'll get a slightly different look. That might just be changing it to grayscale. And now all that yellow tone that I had is gone. But I think there's something nice about the agedness. You want it to be old but not broken.